Morning, as the soldiers broke into the B&I area and approached the cell in which I was, they fired quite a number of shots and finally broke up the padlock. So we got out, and from there we moved to the broadcasting house, where I made that call. I don't know why sometimes God decides to give us so many lives. At a certain moment, instinctively, I just felt a dangerous situation, and I vaulted out of the back of the vehicle, still holding onto the bar, and at that split second, a bullet hit where I was standing. No warning. But I'm just talking about sometimes the power of intuition. As I made my way to the side of the vehicle, hanging onto the door, unfortunately, the ricochet hit the soldier who was the airman who was next to me. But as I was hanging on the door and the driver was making his way for the rest of, the 25 meters and branch left into the quarters, I noticed the bullets that were flying at us were not hitting us, apart from the first one that was made on me. They were hitting the lower part of the vehicle, the tires, etc. And the soldiers and the airmen were still alive in the back of the vehicle. That's when I began to sense something interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, at the appropriate moment, I jumped off the vehicle, by which time, of course, soldiers, some even in their underwear, out of their bedrooms with their wives and children from the two quarters, all sort of moved out, wondering what was going on, and were running away from their bullets towards the Air Force station, the road. And I was following them. We were all on the run. I was going to my station, but they were running away. I don't know where to, but away from the bullets. Ladies and gentlemen, as if by some command, I don't know whether you've ever seen birds whenever they're flying, and on cue, they would veer, of course, and they would all turn in formation. I think we've all noticed that. That's what happened in front of me that morning. I think both soldiers and their wives must have realized, where are they going to? It was an interesting psychological moment, because at that instant, soldiers and their wives just veered into the line of fire towards the left-hand side where the armory was. At that moment, I realized that corruption had sparked the rage of this nation. The nation was angry, was in a state of anger. That was a beautiful moment. They were going to fight it, wherever it was coming from. And I continued, broke through the wire, got into the aircraft that had been prepared for me with the weapons on board. I took off that morning, and I needed to check whether the weapons had been properly, aligned. So I flew down to the sea, and there was an old vessel, big, ship that had been berthed in the sea sand for many years. That was what I used that morning for a target practice, just to check whether my weapons were proper. Ladies and gentlemen, so I fired a few shots into the sea, middle of the boat. It was dead on target, and then I headed straight to the broadcasting house with the fighter aircraft. Because obviously, to counter the effect, that's where the armored cars were going. Now you listen to the second interesting event. When that moment came, and I was driving the aircraft because I noticed one of the armored cars to fire at the armored car. At the last moment, once again, something just put me off it. I lifted the nose of the aircraft away from the armored car and fired the shots beyond the wall of the broadcasting house. In other words, I did not fight, I did not hit the armored car from the air, which is what maybe I should have, but I refused to do it. How interesting. Later that day, when we were hearing one another, giving an account that evening of all that had been happening, can you believe also that the armored car that I refused to fire on also had been given orders to fire at the soldiers, Raji, etc., in the broadcasting house? And he did fire, but you know what he did? He didn't fire at the soldiers. He nosed his weapons down and fired short of.
Wow, this is very chilling and refreshing to also hear from the man himself, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, narrating exactly what happened on the 4th of June, or June 4th, 1979. And this is something that we can't take away from our history books as a country. And it is something that we should be able to know exactly how events unfolded during those turbulent times. I must say that always I equate the release of Rawlings from prison to that of Peter when he was saved by the angel, when he was arrested and kept in custody. And I think that if you know the history or the story of Jerry John Rawlings, you can equally say that he also found himself in that space. And it's not surprised that he says sometimes God gives, he doesn't understand that sometimes God gives human, other day or other time to die. But hey, let's come to the substantive matters raised here. What was this whole about, this all June 4th revolution, whereby, soldiers trying to topple the other or overthrow or kill the other? June 4th actually came because of what people termed as corruption. So corruption has been with us for a very long time. Jerry John Rawlings actually attempted to overthrow the SMC2, the Supreme Military Council 2, on the 15th of May, 1979. But in that coup, he was arrested, so he wasn't successful in his first attempt to overthrow General Akufu's government. And so he was arrested and he was put on trial at the Burma, camp. And lo and behold, because of some utterances or how he defended, his men in the courtroom, he garnered some sort of sympathy from people, and therefore a day for him to be sentenced, he was released, and he came back narrating how he went with the aircraft that was prepared for him, and all of that. It's very, very refreshing, as I have already indicated. But the question is, were all those killings that he came to do, were all of them necessary? At that time, the country was crippled with corruption, and I don't know whether people just didn't find ways to deal with it, and all that they thought was just to kill people, because all the people that were killed by Rawlings were actually deemed to be corrupt. And the question I ask myself is that, has corruption left us as a country today? Today, if we are to use the same measure to kill people who are deemed to be corrupt, how many Ghanaians or how many politicians would die today? I think that the laws must work as a country. Our laws must work. Our laws must not favor anyone. Our laws should not be partisan. we should stand on our grounds and enforce our laws. Once we are able to enforce our laws, I tell you, corruption will be a thing of the past. That is the only solution. All these killings that went on in 1979, house cleaning exercise, was all in a bid to clear the system of corrupt people. Meanwhile, today we still have those corrupt people still amongst us. We hear stories day in and day out. So I believe that as a country, if we really want to move forward in our fight against corruption, we should actually make sure that our laws work. Okay, they work irrespective of who you are. These laws, if they catch up with you, yes, you will be punished as the law says. And I think that the issue of corruption will be a thing of the past. And always you realize that, Rawlings pride himself of the June 4 revolution, but was it really the way to go, looking at what is happening in the country now? Share your view in the comment section. I have had my thoughts on the June 4th revolution. It was just celebrated some 2 days ago. I've had my thoughts on that. Share your view in the comment section. Do you think that it was necessary for the killings of all these generals? And do you also think that how can Ghana also, fight against corruption so that we don't go back to the days of military rule where people were just killing their colleagues? Share your view in the comment section. Bye.